To demo the group policy preferences, I'm in group policy management. What I'm going to do is create and link a new policy at my domain level. So I'm just going to right click RTS networking, create a GPO in this domain and link it here. I'm just going to name it power options. And I'll say OK for that. I'm going to right click this GPO and edit. Under my preferences, I'm going to put that in full screen. Now we'll just navigate through a few things. I'm going to click Control Panel Settings, and you'll see Power Options shows up under Control Panel Settings. Well, if I expand that, I can go to New Power Plan, at least Windows 7. This is what is totally awesome. This is just like configuring settings on your Windows 10 machine. There's not an enable, disable button. Preferences, for the most part, pull the configuration screen from the client into group policy. Where if you were on Windows 10 and you went through your power options and clicked the advanced, you would see this same type of screen show up. The only difference is there, it would only apply to your one computer. Here, I could make this apply to tens of thousands of computers. The moral of that story, don't get these settings wrong because they can have an enormous impact. Right now, this has the 3 power plans that you see on all Windows computers. Balanced, high performance, power saver. So if I simply wanted to edit any of these power plans, I could click the power plan and I could go through like hard disk and say turn off after whatever number of minutes I wanted on battery versus plugged in. If we're working with laptops and I want to control what the power button does, what happens when you close the lid, I could say lid close, go to sleep, do nothing, shut down, hibernate, whatever our choice is. What I'm going to do is actually create a new power plan. So under action, this says update. You would only do that if you want to update one of these 3 plans that already exist. What I'm going to do is choose create. So when I create, I can name this whatever I want. I'm going to create a new power plan and I'm going to name it Go Green! Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. So this is the name of my new power plan. I could now go through and define whatever I want. So let's say I want the hard disk to turn off. Well, I'd never want that to turn off. You want the display to turn off after X amount of minutes. You'll see, 10 and 15. Well, what's neat, notice set as the active power plan, I am not going to choose that because I don't actually want to use this power plan. We just want to see how this would work. So I'm going to click OK. And now on my server I'm on right now, I'm going to just right click on Start and Power Options is off the Start menu. And I'm going to click my additional power settings. So these are the 3 power plans that every computer has. Balanced, high performance, power saver. What I'm going to do to force group policy to update itself, I'm just going to go to Run. And in my Run box, I'm just going to type GP update. Now this tells me computer policy has been updated. And it'll say user policy has been updated, but it closes the moment that is done. Well, we just had 3 power plans. Now when I refresh, our Go Green power plan now applies. Now, every computer in the domain would have this policy show up because I did link it at the domain level. So don't think too much about the individual setting itself, just the kind of the application of it, how that would get processed out. Now, I typed the GP update just to force this, but this would have automatically updated after a few minutes anyway. Or if you had simply rebooted your computer, it would have automatically processed. Your client computer will process group policy every 90 to 120 minutes in the background. It'll automatically process. User configuration, if you simply log off and log back in, processes the next time you log on. And the computer configuration will also process the next time you start up. So either log off, reboot, or just wait 90 to 120 minutes. This would have shown up anyway. Now, the reason this is not selected, my go green, it stayed on balanced. I did not set it as the active power plan because I don't actually want to use those settings. Well, if I just double click this, if I had chose set as the active power plan, it would have actually changed from balanced to go green as the selected power plan. So pretty easy to actually work with. If you can manage power settings in Windows 10, you can manage power settings in group policy because they're the same settings. Where this gets to be incredible. When I go to the Common tab, as we said, what makes this unique, you can have these settings apply one time and never apply again, meaning users could go change their power plan and this would never change it back. If that's what I want, I have to select apply once and do not reapply. Now, if you do not click that, then this setting would really be permanent for your users. They would always have this power plan on their computer and they wouldn't have the ability to actually change it. So if you want it to be optional, just be sure you click that. So it can be made optional. The big part of this, hold on to your seat for this. It's incredible. The item level targeting, which is a fancy name for filtering. But when I select that, I can now click this targeting button here. And in targeting, there is an option to choose new item. Now, I have about 20 or so options I can actually choose from. Now, I know we just defined a power plan. So this is a static list. Many of these would not be associated with setting a power plan. But we just want to kind of work through the list to see what's possible. I could say this setting only applies if you have a battery present in your computer. We could also say you have to be a portable computer. Now, many people find that slightly confusing because portable computers have batteries. That's going to be a laptop. But the battery present, I discovered in a configuration that if you have a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply connected to your computer, that's a battery that's detected, and it would also apply to any computers with UPSs, whether they're clients, servers, would also get that, in addition to your laptops with batteries. You could have this apply to specific computers by name. I could say your CPU speed has to be equal to or greater than, some number we choose. We could say you have to have a certain amount of free disk space. And well, if I choose that, I could even select the drive. So you'll see C, D, E, whatever drive, you must have this amount of free disk space. We could say your IP address must be within a certain range. Now I'll stop clicking on these and just kind of work down the list. But we could say your MAC address has to be within a certain range. Your operating system, well, I will click on this one. But for the operating system, you'll see, I could simply say you have to run Windows 10. You have to run, if it's a server level setting, Server 2019. Now, the Server 2019 family, weirdly, also includes the 2016. That's just weird, but that's the way Microsoft designed it. But if I choose Windows 10, because these settings, generally you're having these applied to your client computers, I could even say that it has to be 64-bit Enterprise Edition. If it's not Windows 10 64-bit Enterprise Edition, this setting would not apply. Pretty fascinating. Now, just a few other common ones on the list. Perhaps the most common is security group. You have to be a member of a certain group. If it's a computer configuration we're working with, the computer has to be a member of a group. If it's a user configuration setting, the user has to be a member of a group. So a pretty extensive list. Now, really, these are just filters is what they actually are. But how they can work. Well, I'm going to actually delete all of these. But let's say we add an operating system again. And we'll say if you run Windows 7, we'll say you have some Windows 7 machines in your environment, but you also have a lot of Windows 10 machines. So I'm going to go back to operating system and I'm going to choose Windows 10. You only want this to apply to Windows 7 and Windows 10. If a server is ever under the scope of this policy, you don't want a server operating system to process this. Well, there's a problem with this statement we have. It says the operating system is Windows 7 and the operating system is Windows 10. Well, that's not going to work. Nobody would actually have this policy apply, or this one specific setting. The preference would not apply to anyone because your operating system cannot be Windows 7 and Windows 10. It has to be 7 or Windows 10. Microsoft thought of that. So if you go to item options for this and, I can simply change it to or. So now operating system is Windows 7 or the operating system is Windows 10. And you could also change any of these is statements, like is Windows 7. You could change that to is not, if you wanted to make this more of an exclusionary setting. So this is actually a conditional expression is what it actually is. So you carve out whatever you want. Operating system is this. Member of this group in Active Directory. Whatever settings you want to define that you want that to be filtered on, you just carve all of those out there. Then it processes out according to what you define. Now, you don't have to do this at all. If I wanted every user, every computer in an OU to get this that it's linked to, you just don't do any item level targeting. And everyone would get it. Now, we know that because when we applied my power setting, it actually applied down to my actual computer. Pretty fascinating. Now, to look at just two more of these briefly. Printers. This is very common. If I were to define a new TCP/IP printer, I'm just going to say I want to create a new printer. I'm going to say the IP address for the printer is 172.16.0.50. And I'm going to say the local name is HP01. And I will enter a share path. So I'll say // print01. We'll say that's the name of the print server /HP01. Name of the printer. Well, what's just incredible, if I go to the common tab, item level targeting, if we go back to the new item, and I'm going to choose IP address range, I can say that only if your IP address is forgive me if I could type, 172.16.0. We'll say 100 to 172.16.0.254. We'll just delete those numbers in the back. Well, now, if I know the office that has this printer, the addresses we automatically assign are 172.16.0.100 through ending in .254. When you connect to that network, if I know your IP is in that range, this will automatically set the printer up on your computer. So you could carve this out for every location you actually have, and users would automatically be set up with whatever printer is in whatever location that they actually go to. You could even use this to set default printers based on the actual location a user is in. Pretty fascinating and incredibly useful. The weirdest thing, and weird is the only way to describe it, I'm going to expand my user configuration preferences. Now, notice they're basically the same. There are a few more options we'll have under the control panel settings for user than we do at the computer level. But for the most part, they're really the same settings. They work the same. But I'm going to collapse the computer configuration. Internet settings is typically something you would always have apply at a user level. An interesting fact about this, if I create some new internet settings, I'm just going to say for IE10. Although, we've moved on to Edge and other browsers. What Microsoft intends for you to do is come here and define every single tab. So whatever settings you want, like from the advanced tab, they want you to come here and go through all of these settings. Make sure they're exactly what you want. Now, the way many people initially use this, which was incorrect, they want us at a home page. So they would come here and they would just set the URL for the home page, they would apply it, then they would think, oh, well, it should work because I typed in the home page. If your eyesight is better than mine, notice there is a dotted red line that shows up here. That means this setting is disabled. Always, by default, the homepage setting is disabled. So even though I created this policy, the homepage setting will not process. The weird part, everything you see that's green will process. So my users are actually going to get all of these settings on every tab. So everything you see green is going to actually apply that configuration to my user's computer. And you'll see most of these are green down through all these options. So the end result to your user, their internet settings get completely reconfigured, but they don't get the one setting they actually wanted, which was the home page. So the way Microsoft designed this, I think it's easiest to see on the Advanced tab. Let's say you wanted to modify only one setting here. This Enable FTP Folder View. That's the only setting that you want to apply. Well, on the keyboard, if you press F8, notice everything turns red. So right now, all these settings are disabled because I pressed F8. And we'll post a list of this in one moment, so you don't have to remember that now, the F8 part. But that's the setting I wanted. Now, if I press F6, that one setting turns green. So I could select this, and I know on this tab, the Advanced tab, the only setting that will process to your computer would be this one setting. So if my computers currently have some of these other settings defined or not, that's not going to be reconfigured. Well, if I go back to the General tab, it works the same. If I were to hit F6, you'll see now that has a green underline. So what Microsoft intends is they don't want you to come here and define a single setting. They want you to work through this and define all the options you want for your users. Then on the Common tab, you'll go to Item Level Targeting, and you would choose a security group, and then you would simply browse out for, let's say, sales users. When I add the sales users group here, they're going to get all the settings we defined. Then you would do the same for users in marketing if they needed different settings. Users in HR, finance. So you would customize this entire configuration for each segment of users and apply it that way. Fascinating concept, just takes a little getting used to. Most settings here work that way. An example, if I go back to power options, actually we define that under computer preferences. So here, if we go back to our power options, that's the power plan I just defined. If I open that, and if I expand anything, I'll click on power buttons and lids. Notice it is green. That means it's going to process out. If I click F8, it turns red, would not be processed out to my clients. Pretty fascinating concept. The part of this that we have to remember, if you press F5, it will enable all settings. Every single setting on the tab will turn green. If you press F6, it will enable the selected setting. So if you just click on one thing and you want to turn that one thing green, meaning you want it enabled, just F6 turns the one thing on. If you press F7, it will disable a selected setting. So just that one setting would turn red, would be disabled. If you press F8, it will disable all settings. Now this is tab by tab. So something like Internet Explorer, or Internet Options it was, you'd have to click on every single tab and use your F keys. Because if you go to the General tab and hit F8, it only disables settings on that General tab. So you'd have to go to Advanced and all the other tabs and enable, disable, whatever settings you want or don't want. So that part's a little different. I wish there was an indication of this in the interface when you configure these options, at least a pop-up or something that would say, we're letting you know this works this way. Some settings are enabled, some are disabled by default, but no such tab exists.